necklace is beautiful. Sue. Your necklace is really pretty.
Thank you.
Who's timing? Okay.
All right. I'm going to do something a little bit different. You all know how I am with jumping out of the box. I'm going to pass along my paper. Your paper is enclosed and then the grid is there. Oh, you already have one. Okay. And I took this page out of my own book for forensic linguistics, and because so much we all write great papers, but our peers rarely get to see them.
Good point.
So I'm letting you all see this. I will collect them back, but Cynthia, since you are mentioned in my work, you're able to keep your copy.
You didn't mention me.
No, not yet, not yet.
Don't start commenting until she.
Oh.
Okay, thank you. No worries. Okay. I'm ready when you're ready.
Okay.
Hold on, let me show you. Some hip hop style. Okay. So I present to you, I'm actually going to walk you through and make sure I cover all the areas for the project. But this is the course project, and I'm doing the ideology of the N-word transformed through time. Now, before we even jump into that, when you go to the back of the paper that I presented to you, you go to the Appendix A on page 16. That is the applied project, which is the extension now of Negus, the N-word transformed through time. And actually, the first time I ever heard that word, if you want to flip, and I'll wait everybody to page 18, it says, "Nah, fuck that, we kings," as the N-word is pronounced, Negus. And I actually heard that from Kendrick Lamar, so within hip hop. So what has happened when you look through the paper now on abstract for page 2, and yes, I'll probably have to read it to make sure at the same time we're covering the same information. Okay, so this paper explores the ideology of the N-word as it addresses how this term is linked to colonialism and that of cultural appropriation. Further, this project can contribute to the conversation of social linguistic theory while examining the two theories of critical race theory and racial formation theory. For this task, I used quantitative methods of narrative, phonological, and grounded theory. Then within this paper, the results reveal that the N-word has transformed through time from Negus to Nega. And I'm going to get crispy to make sure we all understand the terms that are being addressed for this project. So within the introduction, I'm not going to read it, but what has happened, I've taken 24 terms, and we can go to the timeline that's also in the appendix. That will be then starting on page 7. The 24 terms. 22, I read 2 books. Nigger by Randall Kennedy, and there's also a YouTube link that goes with us. I transcribed it, haven't used it yet. And then this book right here by Jabari, I say Asim, the N-word, and it's who can say it, who shouldn't, and why. This is the book where I got the 22 terms from. Then I actually had to I've made notes while I read, had to take those terms, then put them with the time frames that are presented to you within the data. So I'll walk you through. The 2 terms came from our peer, Cynthia Tafoya Stone, in regards to that. And those 2 came from her unicorn paper that Dr. Anderson was so graciously allowing us to use as a guide or information that we needed for the semester. And those are those 24 terms, so those are the data that I gathered for this. So after you go through the paper, you'll see the literature review. I won't read it because the most important thing I think we end up highlighting will be the method section. But I can always go back. So within methods, for narrative, if you would like, turn to page 5. The following time frames were weaved together to form a cohesive story of the origin of the N-word being transformed. So then I use the time frames pre-1619, and actually when you look at the data, John Roth, y'all know I love my Virginians, trying to figure out how to incorporate Virginia somehow, was the first to alter the term to, and actually in one of my KRS-1 presentations, it was presented with 20 Negus got off the ship, a Dutch ship. So he was the first of Jamestown, Virginia to alter the word. So then I addressed 1619, then 1619 to 1799, then the early 1800s to the late 1800s, then the late 1800s to the mid 1900s, then the late 1900s, then the millennium. So that's how the narrative method has been presented. Then for phenomenological, for the data, I just described to you how I gathered the 22 terms plus the 2. For grounded theory, the ideologies for the time frame, when you flip over on page 6, I end up coming up with colonialism and cultural appropriation. I remember meeting with Dr. Anderson. She was like, please don't forget cultural appropriation. So I was able to weave that together, and you don't sound like that, but. So the presented data identifies with how one class of people work to dominate over another class of people through the use of the N-word. And then for cultural appropriation, the presented data reflects how one class of people dominates society with the force of transforming the N-word. Then also the presentation of the data, it reflects how a class of people are working to dominate society with the use of the transformation of the N-word. So then when we go through it, I later discussed that more further in the data, but it did have limitations, and basically to sum up the limitations, one, as I worked on the project, more terms were coming up. So that actually leaves more room for growth in this project and with discussion in the classroom as well. I was limited to one book. Right now, like I said, most of the terms that I've gathered have come from this one book. And then, let's see. And yes, more terms are being discovered with the N-word or how they can be implemented, but also when it comes to the white supremacist projects or the white nationalist projects, that can still tie into this as well. So then we'll get into, again, the presentation of the data. I'm not going to read it to you, but I'll start at least with the term that it originates from. It means royalty. It means king, Ethiopian king. And of course, in hip hop, it's used, and like I credit Kendrick Lamar for the term. Then it goes through, and that's when I referenced to you how John Roth of Jamestown, Virginia, altered the term. Also, I tell you how the term is used, so if it's a noun or an adjective. And I'll get through later why the star is important. You will see the pattern that emerged from the data. So I go through all of these terms, and I don't know if you all have seen all these terms, but I was amazed because I haven't seen all of these terms, which actually intrigued me to do this project, and I thank Dr. Anderson for allowing me to do so. So we go through all of the data, and the ones with the stars, you're going to see later how the pattern emerged. I'm going to show you that. Here we go right here at the bottom of page 10. So when I went through the data, because at first I thought it was 27 terms. Oh no, it was a repetition of terms. So let me bring it up a little further. So when I actually see the results, Niger, nigger, nigga, nigra, and niggerness. I never heard that. So by the time frames, this is the pattern that emerged through the time frames. You'll see nigger and nigga. Nigga, nigger, and nigga. Okay? So when I discuss within the data, I speak again about the results and how then they connect to the pattern that was emerged from what I had discovered based on looking at the data and putting it together. So then when we go to grounded theory, let's see, the ideologies presented below will address how the term nigga was perceived during its use for the time frames of 1800 to 1857, the 1980s, and then of course the millennium. So we go back and look at the chart. You have right here, you have the 1980s, and then you have the millennium. So then I go through, and then I connect it to colonialism, and then I bring the definition back from where I retrieved it from for the data to re-highlight that. Then I address how it connects to, and at the beginning of my paper, I define white America as the white supremacist and the white nationalist. Black America I define as blacks, African Americans, Africans, and people of color. So when you see that, you're going to only see these two groups within this body of work. But I also identify what that means. So when you look at Negus, basically it was to say someone was an Uncle Tom. I'll sum it up that way. Like they sold out to being black or African American at that time frame. And then they were looking out more so for the interests of white America. So I speak about that ideology. Then I go down to the 1980s for Negus, how it emerged. Because when we go back up to the data, this is the term that you see the most. And I was actually shocked. And then you see it again here in the millennium. So I go back through. And I say how it was redefined. The first time I heard it was NWA, niggas with attitudes. I don't know if y'all ever saw Straight Outta Compton. But yeah, so, line. But in 1986, and they came out, and you heard it a lot in West Coast hip hop rap. So I had to use my own self-knowledge for that to bring it into it. So then I go in and basically during this time frame, of course, Black America used it within the culture of hip hop. Or they tried to reclaim the term within the culture itself. And that's what I say right here. And then actually end up bringing in, thanks to also English 677, H. Rap Brown. And he talks about colonialism and how it ties in to the term of nigger and Negus, and then being black and Black in America and so forth. So basically, he was saying it's a term to express kinship and brotherhood and respect. So then when we go up into the present day, the term is still used within hip hop. But again, they're just basically trying to reclaim the word and take back the power of the word. And then I make sure, again, I highlight the people of Black America and then also the people of color. But slightly for the people of color, I guess if you don't look with a hint of brown or blackness, the lines are blurred for some when you use the word. So then we go into cultural appropriation. So when it comes to this, which is the sub-ideology that exists from the ideology of colonialism, when it comes to the word itself, it's basically said, of course, that we saw by John Roth, that he changed the word. When you go further down to the end of the paper, all it is, and by oral tradition, Black America is just using the word to uplift and to be in a powerful position. And again, it's coined as king. So then we go to the conclusion. And basically, I end up just summarizing the whole paper and body of work and what it ties into. But if you look at the very end of this, it says, in other words, which was known to be used within, why did I just go blank? Power to the people, as Black America recaptures the structure by reclaiming the N-word. And I'm trying to think, why did I just go blank? Black Panther Party, thank you. That was their slogan. And then thanks to Dr. Anderson, when we go into the appendix of this paper, which started everything, the very last part of this, she wanted me to do a position statement. Basically, how I feel about the word, when you're of hip hop and you're of the culture, to me it doesn't matter if you're white, black, if you're Asian, whatever the case is. I understand when you're of the culture and you're hearing the word, you're going to use it. But a lot of people don't know it stems from Negus. I even use Negus. But I didn't know myself it stemmed from Negus, which means king. But when we go down into it at the very end, because my mother had always taught me, which is where the oral tradition comes in, is that it just means anybody can be a nigger. It's basically a mindset. It's how people identify themselves. You could be, anybody could be of low class, any of that. You don't have to be Black, African American, or African, or person of color to be a nigger. So when I end it, I suggest before using nigger, one should look in the mirror and reflect upon him or herself to see who the nigga is. And that's how I end it with my position statement on the applied project. And that's where we are. Any questions? Go ahead.
So, this is really interesting because I've never heard that it had origins before being used as a derogatory term. So, it was first used as like a sign of royalty by like African languages, and then it was claimed by like the white colonialists as a derogatory term, and then reclaimed by the Black community. So that's really interesting. I don't know.
And it's still, of course, it's still being used. And I don't know when John Ruff wrote it if he meant that, but I think it's because of what he heard.
Yeah.
So he wrote it how he heard it, and he recorded them for inventory when they came over. It was 20 of them. And then throughout the years, when you get to 1619 on page 7 to 1719, there we go. Then it was in Latin language. It stemmed from Latin language. And then it transformed from oral tradition, and then it went to nigger when it came to the slavery aspect of the word.
It just makes sense because a lot of the things that were associated with African Americans became like derogatory or stigmatized just because the group was. So it totally makes sense that that name, the word, would become like stigmatized as well, derogatory. So it makes sense.
Any other questions?
I like how you do a good solid ideological analysis. That's what's usually missing from other treatments of this word. Like you don't often see a very clear-cut ideological analysis and how ideologies have changed throughout the history of usage.
Yes, ma'am. I'm working on it, hopefully. Okay.
Yeah, that works.
Okay. Any other questions or suggestions? Or
Did you look at any other words that kind of get closely associated with it? Because I know that we had this, I forget what the text was, I think it was an old poem or something like that, and the word niggardly was in it. And my kids were like, they couldn't read the word. And I was like, well, let's look up what it means, because it's not what you think it means. And
I'm trying to think. I'm listening to what you're saying too, but it was someone else told me it was something called nigger something, but it has nothing to do with Black. That's what I'm saying. After I did this paper, I started seeing more terms, and I think that's when I say within the limitations, it could continue this project because more words are coming from it, more words are associated with it. And then you said, I think it was nigger. Did you say niggerly?
The A is N-I-G-G-A-R-D.
No, I think. And it's spelled Nigger, and then
A-R-D-O-Y.
it might be. I didn't see that in this body of work right now, but I am aware of more now. It's like after you do something, things pop up all the time. But sometimes, like you said, they don't mean that necessarily too.
But they might have like started out and about somewhere in there, and then got changed.
I've looked at that word, and I had a different linguistics professor say that the root of that in the OED shows a different.
How did you spell it?
It's from Old Norse.
N-I-G-G-A-R-D-L-Y.
Yeah. It's the root is Old Norse.
Yeah.
Nigla.
Just, it means station.
So it's a lot of words that have branched from it but don't have. It's supposed to be like the negative connotation or denotation.
Can't say this word.
It fell out of use because of what it sounds like. You don't use it. So
But ideology is a complicated thing.
Okay, I wouldn't use it. I wouldn't say it.
No.
It sounds like.
There's lots of adjectives that can be used in it.
Right.
It's
Not
also,
just, it's also an interesting position you take that, you know, it's a, that the position that if it's relevant to the hip hop community, and if it's for the hip hop community, and you're part of that community of practice, that's a different set of rules than, for example, the white nationalists, right?
Right, and that's where, I think y'all know Siobhan Parker. We got into the discussion because she was like, they shouldn't say it at all. And that's why, too, there's another divide within the culture, because even Kendrick Lamar had a fan come up on stage and she was rapping with him and she was like, my nigga, or whatever. And he was like, oh no, you can't say that. But also, I think if people don't know the history behind the word and how it's changed, and some people like know, some people know, really, a lot of generations that are coming up now really don't know because they haven't been taught. So if you don't explain to them the history behind the word, which now we all know it stems to king, it's like, how do you expect them to navigate through it? But again, it's like the power of the word. But my thing is, when you transform it to me, nigga, and it's a cultural hip hop thing, the culture of hip hop is so diverse. So how do you discriminate within the culture when it's diverse, even though we understand, or some understand, not all, the history of the word? And that's why I take that, my perspective on it is that way.
It's a complicated position. You're gonna have pushback on it from some people. Yeah.
Did you quote Rolf? I was curious,
Where are you at? On the data page?
I'm lost.
No. On the data page. On the data page, it actually, KRS-One has said it in his Virginia State University presentation that he gave. So I first heard it from there, but you all know I do a lot on that. So I want to branch out and actually use something else. So on page 10 of this book, he talks about it. I, of course, paraphrased it, but he also explains it. So that's why I credited page 10.
That's all the way back.
I know.
John Rolfe.
Isn't that amazing?
I do appreciate, by the way, that you included, or he included, I guess, the Zora Neale Hurston word, because I did a thing on her and I read that word a lot. She says that, used that a lot. That
And what
word.
page are you on for everyone?
It's page 9.
Okay.
Top of the page.
Yes, that was in this book as well. That's why I still, again, citations, no plagiarism here. Citations, but I did paraphrase unless you saw the direct quotations. Yes, he incorporated that.
Yeah, she did. It was something I found a lot in my research on her, with her using that word.
Yeah, she reclaimed it
She
too.
did.
She
She
did.
did.
Made it her own.
She was cool.
Nobody's gonna tell her how to think it. And she had some unpopular positions too.
She did.
Like she wanted to bring back segregated black towns because well, and she had good reason for it. You know that you didn't have to always be watching over your shoulder. You didn't have to that there of course there's limitations to a segregated town, but there's also like a level of relaxation
Rather
that you
than
can
having a
have.
green book tell you where you're allowed to go,
Right.
go, that was
Yeah.
her
She got a lot of
That's what
pushback
she
for
did.
that.
Yeah.
And where I work a lot, because I do have my peers and coworkers help me sometimes just to make sure revisions are correct. They were enlightened and they were like, a class needs to be done on that. I was like, I would love to, even though I'm still learning, but it brings up the conversation is what Jubal was saying to Ms. Sue in regards to the educational system. Because yeah, the little kids are hearing it too, using it amongst themselves, they hear it in the music. So if they don't know too where it stems from and how it's been altered, like this is a whole, like a project for like everybody to become aware.
This is sort of in the Zora Neale Hurston tradition, if you
You
think
could
about
have
it.
reading, yeah.
But was she a cultural anthropologist?
Yes, she was.
Yeah, she
You could have
She's
readings,
not
like old readings where
She
you
did.
use a
Voodoo.
positive, light versus a negative light, you compare.
I
We did that a lot in class.
When I looked at this, I didn't know they had a Negro Bible. Like, I was like, oh gosh, y'all know me and my books. I need to get books. So it's on page 9, just because I need it for content and knowledge. It was on page 9, right there, the first term that we see. And so I was like, I need to see if I can find that.
Very interesting. Good job, Sarah.
And I'll collect.